Hello, YouTube and GMAT Club. I'm Drew Hoff. I'm the Director of Admissions Consulting at Amerasia. We're a boutique firm. We've been in business for over a decade, helping people get into top MBA programs. I myself have been doing this full time also for over a decade, helping clients from all over the world get into, programs ranging from Harvard and Stanford, all the way down to, Duke Fuqua or Virginia Darden, kind of in that range. So I've, again, worked with hundreds of clients over the years, helping them get into these programs, helping them earn scholarships. And, what I would like to kind of share with you today are the three main pillars, that basically create the foundation of a successful application strategy. This is obviously early in the season. I imagine you're here because you're looking to apply, in the fall or winter of this coming year. And that's great because what I'm focusing on is what to get started with early. How you can begin to kind of build your application strategy and prepare for the application season that's coming up in the next few months. So looking at our agenda today, again, I kind of, went through the introduction of what this is going to be like, but the three main pillars that I'm going to focus on is first the introspection, the introspective process, understanding your candidacy, who you are, essentially kind of building your brand and position as an MBA candidate. A lot of how I look through the lens of this is kind of marketing or selling your candidacy to the schools, because that's what we're doing in this process. Everything we do is to try to turn a no into a yes. That's the whole process, and that's the way we need to look at it because these schools are highly selective. They reject far more people than they admit. So we're looking for every opportunity that we can show them that you're the right candidate, that you're not just qualified, but that you're ideal for this program. And that starts, like I said, with the introspective process, of beginning to understand who you are and what you can do. Now, the second thing that we're going to dive into is then figuring out the school specific strategy. There's no right way to approach this process that fits for all these different programs. All these programs and schools are looking for different things. They value different things. They have different, cultures, different curriculums, different understandings of, topics like leadership. So we need to make sure that we're nuanced in our approach for each individual program. And then once we begin to figure out who you are as a candidate, that introspective process and then understanding of the school and what they're all about, then we need to figure out how do we synthesize that? How do we actually execute these essays and applications in a way that's going to have an impact? How do we bring together that introspective process and, school specific strategies? So again, I'm going to go through all three of these topics. And then at the end, we're going to have a Q&A, where I can answer your questions, and just provide whatever assistance I can as you're preparing for this MBA application process. Now, let's start with introspection, understanding your candidacy. The starting point for me and what I like to focus on are two questions. And those two questions are, who are you and what can you do? Now, the question of who are you, that's a pretty loaded question, right? If you were a philosopher, you'd spend your whole life, examining this question, trying to get to the bottom of it. But for our purposes in these applications, we're only going to have, 500 to 1500 words, and who are you isn't even going to be one of the main prompts in one of these essays. So we have to find our way into this idea of who you are in a way that's going to be, manageable, yet still meaningful. And for me, what I like to focus on is kind of the passion around your goals. Because if you think about a passion, what makes a passion is a person's background and values. And your background and values, that's going to be a pretty good window into who you are. So that's a way that we can begin to kind of make this manageable. Looking at those kind of key moments of influence, the seminal moments in your life that instilled this passion, that puts you on a certain path. Maybe you're interested in healthcare, in terms of business, and so maybe that stems from personal situations in your family, or I had one client that grew up in a refugee camp, and there was illness and sickness all around them, and wanted to serve communities like that. Now, again, your story doesn't have to be as dramatic as that. That's a pretty unique exception. But you have to connect to that very real aspect of what's driving you. What connects internally to that thing that gets you out of bed in the morning, that brings you joy. So this is a question that you can start thinking about now. There's no urgency to this process. Just take it as it comes. Carry a notebook with, or everyone has their phone. Keep notes on your phone of little moments that as you reflect, like, what are your values? What are your passions? And then once you start thinking about those things, you can start to begin to reflect on, all right, what are moments in my past that instilled those passions or those values? Or when were times when I begin to maybe adopt certain values or passions as my own, and really kind of have that show up and manifest itself in my life? If you can start kind of keeping track of those moments, that's going to be information that's going to be useful as we begin to build your essays and applications down the road. Now, equally as important is the question of, what can you do? And what can you do? That's not a question of your job specific skills. It's not about your technical skills. If you're coming from an engineering background, it's going to have nothing to do with that. If it's coming from, a finance background, it's not going to be about your finance acumen. What this is going to be about are what I like to call transferable skills. Some people like to call these soft skills, things like leadership, collaboration, innovation, maturity and readiness, your creativity, your ability to take risks and initiate things. These are the type of skills that these schools really value, that they look to as kind of the metrics for potential. And remember, the MBA, in terms of the evaluative process, is not just about what you've done in the past. If that was the case, all they would care about is your resume, right? They're trying to predict what you're going to be able to do in the future as well. They want successful alumni. Schools like Harvard and Stanford, they want alumni with the potential to end up on Fortune magazine, right? Like those are the type of candidates that they're looking for. So we need to make sure that we show them that you have those skill sets that they value, that they view as kind of, again, those metrics for potential. Now, as you're going through the introspective process and beginning to, kind of sort out, what are your skill sets? What are those kind of key moments that have, kind of, where you've developed these skills or refined these skills? Start to think about the hard-won victories in your career. What are those most challenging moments? Those hard, like I said, hard-won successes. Think about those moments where you had to dig deep, give it your all to, find that success. It's going to be in those moments, particularly the actions you took to overcome certain obstacles and challenges, that we're going to be able to reveal the evidence of your transferable skills. There's nothing worse than an essay or application that uses words like leadership, teamwork, innovation, maturity and readiness, or, any of these transferable skills, and then provides no evidence of that. You need to consider yourself almost like a lawyer, putting together your argument, your case for why you're ready for this next step. And this introspective process, this is something that, even if you decide to work with a consultant down the road, is something that you really have to own in this process. Nobody can do this for you. This is the one piece of the process that you can have a coach and a guide, and that's something I do for my clients. I give them the right questions to ask. I push them in certain directions to think about their lives in these different ways. But it still comes down to your willingness to dig deep, be reflective, and then to share that information in your essays and applications. To kind of provide that honest, unvarnished perspective about who you are and what you can do. Now, again, this is just the starting point, and like I said, this is going to be something that, you can spend the next several months really focusing on, before essays and applications are released by the schools, starting in May and June. This is a component of your application that you can really begin to dive into and begin to, almost create like a database of information, about who you are and what you can do. Now, in this slide, I've provided, just some questions that you can ask yourself. If you could be doing anything in 20 years, money wasn't an object, what would you be doing? If you could move the timeline to 10 years later, does that change things? Further down on the list, like I have, who are the 5 most influential people in your life? Because sometimes those values and passions come from those type of influences. Or, what were the most meaningful experiences in your life? Sometimes it comes from, near death experience or, traveling to new cultures or meeting new people for the first time. That can change people's perspectives and how they see the world and what they're passionate about. So if you're looking to kind of kick off that introspective process, these questions that I provided on this slide are a good place to start. And you can come back to this video anytime to kind of look at these questions, but I'm not going to go through all of them here and just read them off. That would be a waste of your time. So again, you can have this to refer to, but these are a good list to kind of get you going in that introspective process. Now, like I said, the introspective process is not everything. You can begin to kind of build, an idea of your brand and position as an MBA candidate, but you can't just cut and paste that same candidacy across all the different schools and programs. A lot of MBA candidates do this. They just think, oh, this is a good leadership story, or things along those lines, where they end up kind of cut and pasting the same things across all the different schools. And that's an ineffective approach, because all these schools and programs are looking for different things. So we have to understand our target audience here. And the first thing to do is really begin to figure out who that target audience is. And first and foremost, the primary target audience, despite what you may have heard, is not the AdCom. The AdCom is going to make the final decision on your candidacy, but the perspective that they look through as they're making those decisions is what's right for the school. How does this person fit within, the culture, the curriculum, the understanding of leadership at this program. So it's all about looking at the school and program and really kind of understanding what they're about from what I like to call a DNA perspective. And we're going to dive into what that DNA is and kind of what that looks like at a few different schools in just a minute. And then the secondary audience that we have to consider is that individual admission officer that's reading your file. And this is about just employing a simple skill of empathy, of really beginning to figure out, who this person is. And now, again, we're not going to know specifically. We're not going to be able to know their background, their educational experience, the jobs they've had before this. All we're going to know is that they're working essentially kind of a seasonal job, where they're reading through a ton of files in a small window of time. So this is not going to be a person that's patient. So if you have a messy application or a subtle application, an essay, or just something that's kind of esoteric, that could go over a person's head. They're looking for a clear and direct messaging in these essays and applications. So we're going to be looking to build essays and applications that are clear and concise, and then plug into that DNA of the school. Really looking to understand what that school is all about. Now, again, we're early in the season, so there's steps you can take to begin to learn more about these programs. Now, obviously, I understand these schools extremely well because I've been an admissions consultant for over 10 years. So I understand these programs. I know what they're all about. I have, contacts at all these schools. I know many of the deans. And, so I just have a good understanding of what these programs are looking for. And that's kind of how we build our school strategies. Now, if you're looking to do this on your own, there's a few kind of steps that you can take. When I was looking to just explore the website, pour through it, look through every resource that they have, video clips, look into classes, clubs, see what the school presents. What they present is telling you a lot about what they value, right? What they put out front in those those kind of marketing pages, for the school. Now, additionally, look at other content, on sites like YouTube. There's plenty of resources. You can actually sit in on classes, things like that. Um, Additionally, you can go to admissions events, make contacts with people there. Now, when you go to like an information session or something like that, the key is to approach it as a buyer and not a seller. And what I mean by that is don't go to an admission event thinking you're going to make like all these amazing contacts and create a network that's going to get you into the school. That's not going to happen. Even if you meet an admission officer, they're not going to remember you because they're doing a ton of these events and they're just not worried about evaluating candidates right now. They're looking to, promote the school and increase applications. That's what these admission events are for. So what you're looking to do is just learn about the school. Learn if this is the right fit for you. Learn about what these programs have to offer. Begin to understand that DNA. So if you do apply, you can begin to, tailor your application in a way that begins to kind of elevate you from being a qualified candidate into an ideal candidate. And then additionally, I listed here, there's campus visits, if those are allowed. Most campuses are starting to open back up and allow things like this. And then again, talk to students and alumni. If you can do those things, you're going to start to have a much better understanding of these schools. Now, let's go through some examples. Like I said, the way that I look at this and the way that I begin to kind of build school strategies for my clients is first by starting with kind of the thematic, looking at what is ingrained in these schools from their culture, their curriculum, their understanding of leadership, all the way up to the admissions office. And I like to call this the DNA of a school because, like I said, it's just things that are ingrained in what these schools are all about. Now let's start by talking about Kellogg and Wharton. And the reason I like to start by talking about these two schools is because they share some similarities on the surface that make them seem really similar in terms of school DNA. But once we kind of begin to understand their understanding of leadership and where leadership is derived, we see that they're almost in conflict. Kellogg is probably the easiest school to recognize from what I would call a DNA perspective. And their DNA is that they're the team-based leadership school. Everything Kellogg does is about collaboration. Now, again, most people, on here are probably going to know that Kellogg is a great feeder school into management consulting, and with management consulting, you're working in new teams all the time, right? Maybe not a new, internal team, but at least new external partners for every new client that you work with. And so you have to learn how to kind of build those teams, build that collaboration. So it makes sense that would be kind of a center and a focus of the DNA at Kellogg and what they value. Now, if we look over at Wharton, the Wharton DNA is about collaborative leadership through innovation and globalization. So like I said, that looks really similar on its surface. Like we just kind of sprinkled in some innovation and globalization to mix it up, right? Like that's what it looks like on its surface. But let's explore the concept of leadership at both of these schools. Kellogg, because it's this team-based leadership school, they see leadership as being built on relationships. It's your ability to connect with people, to understand them. Essentially leadership by way of empathy. That is what Kellogg is looking for in their essays and applications. Now, if we go back over to Wharton essentially kind of rejects that style of leadership. It has almost gone as far to say that it's nonsense. And the reason for that is they see leadership as needing to be more institutional. And if it's built on relationships, that requires one-on-one interaction. And a warden wants more of an umbrella over an organization. And so they see leadership as being more derived through information and knowledge, essentially your decision making. They want to see, what they believe is that, to be a leader, you need people to follow you. And to get people to follow you, you need to make the right decisions. And to make the right decisions, you need the right information. So again, it's this much more informational based style of leadership and what they're looking for. And for me, these would be the starting points in building, our school strategies. So beginning to find pieces in your introspection and reflection, when we're looking at those questions of who are you and what can you do, what are the aspects that align to these very different schools in their understanding of leadership. So if you're more of a person that is empathetic and it, leads by connecting with people, that would probably work well with Kellogg. We would need to find, stories that, revolve around you working in teams, solving interpersonal issues, things along those lines that show that style of leadership. Whereas with Wharton, we would need to make it more maybe project based, where you're conducting research and reaching out to peers and supervisors to earn their ideas and insights, to build a plan, and then begin to execute on those plans. Now, I just got a question here about LBS and Foster. If we're looking at DNAs for those type of schools, for LBS, it's quite different. And largely based, the European programs all kind of have a central component to their DNA, which is built on maturity and readiness. There's not a lot of hand holding in terms of, the career development and networking at these programs, largely based kind of on their program structures. Um, and so what they're looking for are candidates that don't need that hand holding, that can initiate, are self-starters. So that's going to be one of the things that we would look at LBS. Now for Foster, anytime we start to kind of drift towards the outside of the top 25 or just around the top 25 in terms of business schools, we see a DNA that's more about leadership development. What they want to see is that you're somebody that can grow, that learns, that, is able to turn mistakes into key learning experiences and grow and develop from those. So again, those would be kind of starting points for those applications. Now, if we're working at, say, Harvard or Stanford, the Harvard DNA is that they're the leadership school. But obviously, we just saw from Wharton and Kellogg, there's not a single idea of what leadership is. So what Harvard's looking for is essentially limitless leadership potential. That's what they value. And over the past few years, Harvard's had a really ambiguous essay question. Their essay question is basically, it says, tell us something that we don't already know from reviewing the rest of your application and resume. And there's no other instructions. There's no word count. So it's extremely ambiguous in terms of what they're looking for. A lot of people talk about, career goals and passions, or they talk about, kind of their career decisions and kind of chronologically how they've grown and developed through different roles. All of those seem, like they could work, but it doesn't plug into that DNA. So for us and the clients that we work with, what we like to focus on is we want to show Harvard, how you realized your potential as a leader. So essentially almost tell like your leadership origin story, essentially kind of your Batman story. Now, again, hopefully your story is not quite as tragic or dramatic as the Batman story, but that's essentially what we want to tell is, what were those moments in your past that led to you in this one kind of key pivotal moment where you stepped up to, start fighting crime, or stepped up as a leader and really discovered your potential there. That's a story that resonates with HBS and what they're looking for. Now, if we go over to a school like Stanford, at GSB, their DNA is quite different. If HBS is almost kind of the alpha, it's all about that leadership potential. Stanford is more of a beta perspective where it's all about who you are as a person. they want to understand what makes you tick. What do you value? So that passion perspective, who you are, that part of that introspective process is going to play out huge in building that essay or application. Now, again, every program, from Harvard to Foster, is going to have their own unique DNAs, and we need to figure out how do we begin to synthesize, who you are, what you can do with the DNA of these schools. And like I said, now that you understand these programs and you have a good kind of baseline of introspection about your candidacy, what's next? And what's next is figuring out how to put all those pieces together, the execution. Like I said, synthesizing who you are, what you can do, and then the DNA of each school. So what I like to do with my clients is create a roadmap for each application and essay, to really begin to kind of figure out, all right, what is needed to connect into that DNA while at the same time revealing, who you are and what you can do. That's what we're looking to build. And regardless of the questions, those are kind of the starting points. And then the questions give us that framework of how to begin to build that in to these essays and applications. So for example, if we're working on Wharton, last year Wharton had the question, how do you plan to use the Wharton MBA program to help you achieve your future professional goals? You might consider your past experience, short and long-term goals, and resources available at Wharton. So, if you were working on this essay, this is essentially kind of how I would guide you to begin to kind of break this down and think about it as, you're looking to kind of use pieces from that introspective process and consider that DNA perspective. So I would break this essay down into 5 paragraphs. And those 5 paragraphs I call the what, the why, the how, the when, and the where. Now, the what paragraph, that's all about what are your career goals. So this is where we're going to have your short-term career goal and your long-term career goal. And your short-term career goal for a school like Wharton needs to be all about employability. So you need to look at it from the school's perspective. Is this a job that they can help you achieve? If you're coming from, say, a consulting background and you say that you want to get into venture capitalism, that might be a bit of a stretch from their perspective because usually you need more of a finance background. That's what they're going to be looking for there. And obviously venture capitalism is extremely competitive as well. So that could just raise some red flags that maybe you don't understand, what the MBA will be able to provide you and how it can help you move forward. So again, the short-term goal it needs to be very practical. It needs to make sense with what you've done in the past and with where you're going in the future. So again, we're going to focus more on that long-term goal. And that long-term goal needs to be that embodiment of your ambition and your passion. That's what they're going to be looking for. And so this can be almost kind of like the moonshot for your career. If everything worked out perfectly, what would that look like? And like I said, that short-term goal needs to be a bridge between your past and where you're looking in the future. And once we've done that, then I would have you move into paragraph 2, the why paragraph. And this paragraph is all about why are these your goals? So this is where we get to actually unpack that passion. Tell the stories, the moments of influence that began to set you on this path. And the reason we tell this story is because this is how we begin to connect with that individual admission officer, that secondary target audience. This is a person that comes into the process dispassionate, right? They're trying to make fair decisions for everybody. And, there's no reason for them to care about your application going into it, right? So what we're looking to do is to kind of convince them and give them those reasons to care. That's what we're looking to build in here, is to show why this matters to you, and hopefully it'll start to matter to them. And once we've done that, then we can move into the paragraph 3, the how paragraph. And the how paragraph is all about how have you prepared yourself for these goals? So this is kind of the what can you do aspect of this essay, where we want to focus on those transferable skills like leadership, teamwork, innovation. And again, for Wharton, we want to make sure that we're connecting into that DNA, that leadership perspective that's more kind of informational, of using knowledge and kind of data-driven decision making, that Wharton really values. That's going to be one of the things we're looking to build in there. And like I said earlier, we want to show that through your actions. Show actions of you overcoming, different obstacles and challenges. By doing that, that's how we can prove that you have these skill sets rather than state it. And like I said, there's nothing worse than an essay or application that uses words like leadership, teamwork, innovation, just as buzzwords. We want to be that lawyer presenting the evidence of your case. And once we've done that, then we can move into the win paragraph. And the win paragraph is all about why now. And when I say why now, don't confuse that with why an MBA. A lot of people do that and they want to talk about all the things they feel like they need from an MBA. They need a more holistic understanding of business, or they need, finance or strategy tools, or they need the network that comes from this program. All that stuff is definitely understandable that you feel like you might need that, but it's also readily apparent when an admission officer looks at your essays and your resume. They're going to see what you need from an MBA program. You don't need to spell it out for them. They're going to have an idea of what what you're looking for already. So it's kind of a waste of space to tell them something that they already know. So instead of this kind of neediness aspect, we're going to replace it with more of a sense of readiness. Show how all the pieces in your past have readied you for this next step. Have readied you to take this leap and are going to allow you to succeed in the MBA program and beyond. That is what this win paragraph is all about. And once you've done that, then you can move into the where. And the where paragraph is all about is all about, what is it about this Wharton's culture, their curriculum, their clubs and resources, the faculty, the student body, the location, all these different things that you're excited about that are going to enhance your learning, going to further prepare you for your goals. But additionally, make sure you don't just kind of have like a laundry list or a shopping list of resources, because the school they don't want to see just how you're going to consume, they want to see what you're going to offer as well. So you need to show in at least a few places how you're going to bring your experience, your perspective, your passion, your values to make an impact on this learning community as well. Show how you're going to be able to contribute, at least in a few areas, to different classes, clubs, things like that, where you have something to offer and bring to the table. So if we approach an essay like that, we're doing a few things. We're really showing, we're connecting into the DNA of Wharton and what they're looking for. But at the same time, we're giving a comprehensive perspective about who you are and what you can do. We provide that what paragraph that shows what you want to do. We go into the why paragraph that shows why you want to do this and what's driving you forward. And then you have the how paragraph that shows how you prepared yourself, and moves into that win paragraph that shows that this is the right next step for you. And then goes into the school and how it's going to prepare you to achieve those goals. So by breaking things down and really creating this, specific roadmap and structure, we really make these essays clear and concise. And like I said, that's really valuable in this process when you consider that individual admission officer. They're not, like I said, they're not going to respond to something that's messy or, doesn't have that clear messaging in it. By really breaking things down this way, we're able to connect with that school and with that person reading your application. Now, so I got a question here asking about work experience for these schools. I would say most of these schools are looking for, anywhere from kind of 2 to 5, maybe even 6 years of experience in some cases. Now, you don't have to have work experience to apply to a couple of them. HBS and GSB both have like what are called 2+2 programs where you can apply right out of college and they would place you in a job for 2 years and then you would do the MBA after that. So all these schools are going to have some sort of work experience, but again, there are some options to apply, as a college senior, and get some work experience, then go into the school and program. But most of them are going to be looking, I would say kind of 4 years minimum in most cases, maybe a little less for, like I said, HBS and Stanford, which trend just a little bit younger than all these other programs. That's going to be kind of the work experience, most of these programs are looking for. Getting back to a little bit of the execution of these applications and essays, I wanted to give one more example for you. So if we're working on a school like Kellogg, Kellogg has a leadership essay. We can go back to this page to. I'm actually having a tough time seeing it here. So Kellogg's purpose is to educate, equip, aspire, brave leaders who create lasting value. Provide a recent example where you have demonstrated leadership and created lasting value. So if we have that essay, again, this was from last year, and Kellogg could change their essays completely, this summer. But if they were to keep this essay, the way that I would begin to guide you, or the way that you would want to start thinking about like a leadership or an impact essay, is in the following structure and breakdown. Where you want to start with the situation, what's happening, who's involved, where is this going on, why, the who, what, where's, and whys, essentially. That's how you start a story and a leadership impact essay. Give the reader all the information they need up front, and then you can go into the next paragraph, which is the complications. What were the challenges and obstacles you were facing in this situation? And like I said, for Kellogg, we would want to tell a story that's more focused on the interpersonal. So we would probably want to show like an experience that maybe is dealing with like conflict on a team, or trying to persuade a supervisor of something, and maybe they were in stark opposition of your idea. Those could be the type of complications you face to connect in to the DNA of that school. And so once you begin to figure out, that story and kind of what those complications are, then you would want to reflect on and think about, all right, what are the actions I took to overcome each one of those complications? How did I convince this person? Which steps did I take? How did I begin to influence them and convince them to come around to my way of thinking? Or how did I resolve this conflict on this team? Those are the actions you would want to begin to kind of build into this essay. And I would say that's kind of the meat of this essay, because like I said, this is how you prove those transferable skills. And once we've done that, then you can move into the results. And you want to share the practical business result that this had, but also reveal kind of your personal learning and growth results. That's going to be an important aspect. And so this is very much like you would respond in a behavioral interview setting. As it provide the situation, complications, actions, results, or SCAR, as I like to do it. And again, we're going to do that through that lens of the DNA of this school. That's how we're going to begin to build this essay and application. Now, those are, again, kind of the major areas to get started. If you can begin to kind of, look at your introspection and reflection, really spend the next couple of months diving deep. And again, even if there's things in your background that are difficult to reflect on, maybe were challenging times in your life, that can be important to these essays and applications. So I really encourage you to dig deep, be open and honest, and reveal that information. Again, reveal that information through the lens of the DNA of that school. And then, once you begin to understand those schools, then begin to map out your essays to where you can provide information that's clear and concise. If you can kind of hit on those three things, this is going to be an excellent starting point to your essays and applications. Now, again, things get more complicated. That's one of the reasons, candidates come to work with me, is to navigate all the nuance, all the, kind of fine detail in this process. But this should give you a pretty good kind of foundation and starting point to get started on building, essays and applications that are successful in this process, that begin to elevate you from being, like I said, a qualified candidate to becoming an ideal candidate at these schools. So now we're going to dive into a little bit more of that Q&A. I noticed I just got one more question on here. So does international work experience work as an advantage if you come from an overrepresented? So if you're coming from India, international work experience is helpful for sure. Particularly if that experience is Western. That does seem to help a lot at these programs. Now, it doesn't have to be, if you're working in China or the Middle East or wherever you're kind of coming from, that's still more of a global perspective. And that's something that's valued at most of these schools. They want to see that you have an ability to work with people from different backgrounds, different perspectives, people that have, you know, life experiences that, wildly diverge from your own. They want to see that you're still able to work with them. So the fact that you might have international work experience can definitely work in your favor and be something that helps you stand out in an overrepresented demographic or a population like India. Other questions for me? Give it a few more minutes here. So, what if you carry no international experience? Then you have to look for other ways to differentiate yourself, to show that you're not just another face in the crowd. I've worked with a lot of Indian candidates over the years. Just this year, I helped Indian candidates get into Harvard, GSB, most of the other kind of M7 schools. And not all those people have international experience. Some of those people do only have lived and worked in India their whole life. And one of the things that you need to really focus on is showing what sets you apart. What are ways that we can show, again, like I said, not another face in the crowd, and whether that comes from professional experience or kind of that passion aspect, or kind of again, maybe showing a little bit more of kind of the emotional intelligence or decency quotient that these schools are looking for. In India, like again, I worked with a lot of candidates that have impressive backgrounds that work really hard. And again, unfortunately, that's not always enough. You have to show those other elements of who you are that make you kind of that fully, three-dimensional person that these schools really value. So, look for aspects kind of outside the professional realm that begin to set you apart. What makes you unique? What makes you you essentially? You need to let that come through in those applications because that's what connects with people that are reading these essays and applications. Um, the next question, you have 12 to 13 years of work experience, Pakistan and the Middle East. Would it be a disadvantage to have such a long, being of that age, because that probably puts you at being like, I would say 33, probably right around there. That can be a little more difficult at these MBA programs. Now, there's some schools that don't care about age, and again, I would probably look for schools more outside of that. Those M7s. Starting to look at schools like maybe University of Michigan Ross or Duke Fuqua, University of Virginia Darden, or even maybe a little bit lower ranked, or depending on where you're at in your career, looking at executive MBAs as well. That is absolutely another way to go. If you do have that much work experience, um, so that's something to keep in mind. Hobby, thanks for asking if I'm having a great day. My day just got started. It's 8 a.m. or 8:15 a.m. right now, but I appreciate that. Thanks a lot. Any other questions? All right, everyone. Well, unless something comes in here in just the next minute or so, I'm going to look to sign. Oh, I'm going to look to sign off. As you can see, I left my contact information on here. So if you do have additional questions, if you're interested in working with a consultant at Amerasia, including myself, these are ways to reach out to us. I see. I just got another question here. Um, So an MBBS doctor, experience of 2 to 3 years. Okay, so you're looking to kind of apply to the GMAT this year? I've worked with several doctors over the years, and they tend to do quite well in the MBA process. Especially if your goal is to, launch like a pharmaceutical company or a chain of hospitals or micro finance healthcare insurance. Those type of things. If your goal kind of plugs in still into that healthcare space, that can be something that is, really powerful and, these schools recognize. Um, looking at Indian school business, I think you'd have an excellent shot, depending on what you get with that GMAT score, obviously that could be cause a bit of a sliding scale. But, I think you're set up well from just a demographic perspective where, having, being a doctor is going to set you apart right there. So that is something that's the management aspect of healthcare. Okay, yeah, no, again, I think I would set your goals higher than that. Um, to be honest with you, possibly, start, eventually long term starting your own type of firm, maybe in that healthcare or agriculture space. Because with your combined degrees, you'd be an attractive candidate for, understanding both the science and the business side, in either one of those industries. And that's something that helps attract investors. So that I think a long-term goal that's entrepreneurial would be a really good fit and something that could really help you out there. So I got another one from Cassandra. So other schools that look less at age, yeah. So I would say only Harvard and Stanford are schools that are trending younger. For most schools, age doesn't really matter. If you do start to get to like 33, 34, that's a little more mid-career. And like I said, the EMBA might start to be a little more appropriate depending on where you're at in your career. But anything kind of below that, I would say, any school, even including Wharton, MIT Sloan, to, some of the, again, like some of those schools that are ranked, more like NYU Stern, things like that, they're all going to be open to, candidates that are maybe slightly older than the average. Again, the averages at these schools, it's not necessarily, it's because they prefer people that are 27, 28. It's just that's kind of normal time when people apply, so that's the bulk of the candidates that they receive. So it's not about a preference necessarily at these schools. Because there's a few 1 year full-time programs. Um, so, 1 year full-time programs, again, the European programs are great. INSEAD, I would say is one to look at. The Stanford MSX, that's an excellent program. I would have to look into more of kind of those abbreviated programs for you. It's not something I typically work on a whole lot, especially for US schools. But it is something that I would look into a little bit more to be able to help you with that. But again, I'm mainly looking at kind of just the full-time MBA programs. That's where my specialty really lies. Any other questions? I don't think I missed any. So again, if you have additional questions, you want to speak to a consultant, we definitely give away a free consulting session for anyone that wants to kind of explore this process further. So feel free to reach out to me. We can get that set up and see if we'd possibly be a good pair to work together as well. Um, Again, if you just have questions as well, feel free to reach out and I'll get back to you as quickly as possible. Thanks for. Oh, I got one more question here. Is round three more competitive? Yeah, it's much more difficult. It depends on the school. So I would say the last round is really competitive because some schools have like 4 rounds. So round three is more like round one and round two. but most schools round threes is going to be extremely competitive. They usually admit only about like 3% of the class in that final round. And that's because they're looking to kind of fill out their like gaps in their yield. If they're not getting the candidates that they thought that, would accept like offers and things like that, they might need to like bump up their average GMAT score. So they're going to look to admit people in round three with really high GMAT scores, things like that. So it's tough to predict exactly what they're looking for, and they're only admitting a small number of people in round three. So yeah, it's pretty difficult. Another question here: how much of a deal breaker is low work experience? 2 to 3 years. Also, can a good GMAT compensate for this gap? Yeah, a good GMAT can for sure. And then also it's about showing your development in those 2 to 3 years. So low work experience, you might say like, so it might be more of an entry level, like an analyst type job. That's fine. You just need to show how you've stepped up as a leader personally. Now, you might not be in a leadership role. That's differently. That's kind of like an authoritarian model of leadership, right? Just because somebody's in charge doesn't make them a good leader. So it's looking at showing, you can lead from the bottom up as well, showing that you have good leadership skills. So things like that. Those are the things we'd want to focus on, is how your skill set is accelerated, even if your career path and experience isn't. That's how we begin to kind of solve that issue. And so, a good GMAT can help compensate, for less work experience, but there's other ways to do that in the essays and applications as well. It's not just about those core numbers. Yeah. So contacts for consultation, again, it's listed on the slide here. My email address is dhoff, DHOFF at amerasiaconsulting.com. Or you can look at the website, just amerasiaconsulting.com, and there's a link to, sign up for a consultations there as well. So you can reach out to either one, through the website, or just email me directly. All right, excellent. Oh, yeah. So the consultant, including myself, I've worked with several candidates that have applied to ISB and helped them get into that program. So if that's something you're looking for, yeah, we could absolutely help you out, including me. That is one of the schools that I do have a lot of insight into. Hi there. Sorry about that. I got kicked off for a second. I'm back on the chat, but yeah, email address is dhoff, DHOFF at amerasiaconsulting.com. And I appreciate that. Yeah, those are some good questions for introspection. And again, take your time with that. There's no rush. You got a couple of months before schools even start to release their essays and applications. So definitely take your time with that. Dive into it. Like I said, collect notes as you're going on walks, things like that. There's no set time. for going into that introspective process. And the deeper you dive, the more, insightful and the better your applications are going to be. All right. Again, thank you, everybody. I think I'm going to sign off now. If you have additional questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Again, that's DHoff, DHOFF, at amerasiaconsulting.com, or, through our website, just amerasiaconsulting.com. And I can help you out. And, whether it's just with a few questions or if you're interested in working with a consultant, either way, I'd happy to speak with you. All right, everyone, have a good day. Bye.